Well, thank you, Chikne sir and Journeys for this wonderful opportunity, to interact with you people about one of the very interesting group. I am doing this webinar for the last maybe from see the first webinar we did was on 22nd March. Probably I was the first person to do a free webinar on biodiversity in India. It was on the first day when the lockdown was announced. And from then I'm doing it. And I'm lucky and I'm really thankful to Sushil because he is the second person who asked me to do a session on Sicilians. There's one session I did on Sicilians was for a NGO in West Bengal, and this is the second time. Otherwise, everybody wants to do session on snakes, and then I'm bored with that. So when Sushil said, I want you to talk on Sicilians, I was really happy. Okay, because this is one group which is very poorly understood, and I'm trying my level best to talk about that. So let me start with my presentation. So I will talk about Sicilians today, and for me, Sicilians are like the hidden gems. No, these are the animals which are the important components of biodiversity, and really not much is known about them. So I think today we have a very wonderful session for this. Understanding them is something which is really very important. So unfortunately, we are fascinated by quite a lot of life forms, and when it comes to life forms, we are talking about various things. It starts from insects and ancient tigers, but much of the fascination goes to charismatic groups, and the groups like this are always been sidelined. I always say that Sicilians are always sidelined, and Sicilians are more sidelined because they were hidden. They're underground and blah blah blah. So let's interact with this and talk about what is important here. Yeah. So let's talk about biodiversity. So what do we mean by biodiversity? Biodiversity has everything. So every word mentioned in this particular slide is covered biodiversity. We talk about biodiversity, it has plants, animals, everything, technically everything. So all life forms is composed of biodiversity. So we can ask a second question, where to find this biodiversity, where the biodiversity is located. So see, I'm just trying to make it a bit simpler, trying to make this particular interaction more easier and coming in there and doing something. So rather than that, let's make it a bit inclusive. So let's ask a second question. Where is this biodiversity located? Where all these things in the biodiversity are located? And the answer is they're everywhere. There are burrowing forms, there are aquatic forms, there are terrestrial forms, there are aerial forms, there are arboreal forms. So you talk about the habitats, biodiversity is there. So it is technically everywhere. It is everywhere. Okay. So how effectively they do that? So this is something which we need to think of. If they are everywhere, how manage to live in those different habitats, basically? How and why? Why is something which we know, but how they can do it, that is something really very interesting. To do that, they have made all the changes in their body forms, all the changes in their living strategies. Everything is modified, everything is changed in such a way that they're effectively utilizing all these resources. So when I talk about burrowing forms indicate that these animals living there have the things which are needed to live there comfortably. Means their body shape, body structure is exactly matching their requirement. Their food is again matching their requirement. That's why. So if you look at all this, like this is the best example now. Look at the frogs. Frogs start their life in water. Means they have to have certain things to live there comfortably. So their tadpoles have tail. Oh, this is something really interesting. Like, why do tadpoles have tail? Tadpoles need the tail because they want to live in water. It's very simple. But as they come on the ground, the tail is not needed. The tail is lost. So what I mean to say is every habitat has a unique diversity there, and all that diversity has unique features. And by looking at those features, we can tell that this is a terrestrial animal, this is an aquatic animal, and so on and so forth. That's why And that is one of the biggest lessons we can get from biodiversity, we can get from nature. So what we learn from nature is phenomenal, is amazing. you know like one of the biggest thing we can learn from nature is how to live comfortably there. That is something really interesting, and to get that we need to understand how do they do it. Interestingly, there are different life forms now, and we can ask the question, all those body, like whatever I talked just before, is it true for all the life forms? Yes, it is true for all the life forms. So if you take the example of an insect or a vertebrate or any kind of invertebrate, the habitat in which they are living, their body forms are made like that. They have those typical body forms to live those habitats quite comfortably. This is something really cool about the biodiversity. You take any example, and probably it is true for plants as well. The aquatic plants have a different setup. The dry, arid, the plants in the arid landscapes, they are different. The plants in the Western Ghats are different. So this is something which we need to understand, which we need to learn from biodiversity, from nature, that in whatever condition you are, try to utilize the resources effectively so that you do live. This is learn from biodiversity. So what are the different life forms? Let's look at that first. So basically, these are life forms. And when it comes, it is from, as I told, starting from vertebrates to invertebrates. There are invertebrates, there are vertebrates, and there are different kinds of invertebrates and kinds of vertebrates. So let's talk about vertebrates. Let's talk about the animals which having the bones. In that, we have 5 different groups. First, fishes. Now, how to identify fishes? Look at their body shape. It's quite unique. And one of the unique characters, they have the gills. Then we have amphibians. Amphibians are the terrestrial vertebrates. And again, how to identify them? They have a smooth skin. Among all the vertebrates, amphibians have the smooth skin. Then are the reptiles, then birds, then mammals. I'm not going into those details. But among them, there are additional features to live in the variable habitats again. So this is something cool about biodiversity, cool about nature. So what are amphibians? Let's talk about that. So we talked about different life forms. In that, there are vertebrates. In the vertebrate, there are amphibians. So amphibians are the animals who complete their list. One is a terrestrial phase and another is aquatic phase. This is what is a simple definition of what amphibians are. And in amphibians now, we have different groups. We can ask a second question. As I told you, let's try to look at the analogy of whatever we discussed. We started from the life forms and we asked the second question, where do they live? Let's ask the same question for amphibians as well. So what are the different kinds of amphibians? Now we saw that there are different kinds of amphibians. Prior to that, let's ask the question, where do they live? Here also the question is same. There are burrowing amphibians, there are terrestrial amphibians, there are aquatic amphibians, and there are arboreal amphibians as well. Means they are everywhere. We saw that every life form is occurring in varied, in different habitats now, and to live there, they modified their body shape and everything. Amphibians did the same thing. Now, because of that, we see them everywhere. This is something cool about amphibians again. Look at this. Look at this poster and look at the diversity here. If you look at the poster, I think one character which is quite common in each and every individual shown here. That is, all these are vertebrates. Number one. What is the second character which is common among all of them? That is, they all have smooth skin. They don't have scales on their body. I mean, scales are not visible. That's why they are not fishes or they are not reptiles. They don't have, I don't see any feather on their body. It means they are not birds. I don't see in their body. It means they are not mammals. So all of them are vertebrates. with the smooth skin. Means they are amphibians. Okay, so what is the different diversity you see here? The tremendous diversity in their coloration. Why such a diversity in coloration? Again, colors in amphibians are, are needed for them to live, camouflage themselves into their surrounding. There are other use of the colors as well, but predominantly this is how coloration helps. So there is a diversity in coloration. Look at the body shape. There's a tremendous diversity in the body shape as well. Why do they have such a diversity in their start asking this question, you get into their lifestyle. No, they have this body shape because their ancestors have it or had it because they need it like that. So they have a different eye shapes as well. So certain amphibians have bigger eyes and certain amphibians have smaller eyes. Certain amphibians have longer limbs. Certain amphibians have shorter limbs. There are certain amphibians without limbs. Why such diversity? So this is something really amazing about this group of vertebrates again. So this diversity indicates that they have different habitat preferences. And if they have a different habitat preferences, then which are those? Can we use this particular body shape to diagnose the amphibians? No? Yes, we can do that. So the amphibians are broadly classified into three different groups. The first group composed of the amphibians who has tail. The second group are of the amphibians who lost hands and legs, and the third group is of the amphibians who has who doesn't have a hand and leg. So who doesn't have a tail, basically, it's anurans. So these are the three major groups of amphibians, basically. So now we can ask why they have such a different body form again. So see, the thing is, we are very keen. We know that there are so many things which we know, but there are so many things which we really don't know. I know that this is a Sicilian, but the second question is, why it is a Sicilian? I don't know. Or why it is a salamander? I don't know. Now, if I know why it is a Sicilian, then why do they lose their limbs? Why there are so many other features which are not there in the other groups of amphibians? Now, if I start asking these questions, then the science becomes really fun. So what is happening today? I think there are quite a lot of amazing nature lovers who must be attending this particular class today. And believe me, many of us start our journey from the destination. No, like I'm talking about journey here because we are organizing this program for journeys. Okay, so unfortunately, our nature love starts with the destination, and then we try to look at from where we started. Okay, let me explain it in bit greater details now. So if I show you a photograph of any amphibian or a reptile, I can immediately, oh, this is Naja, this is Davuya raseli, this is Ichthyopis bombensis. Means we are at the destination. Now my second question, why it is Naja? Means आपने कौन सा कहाँ से जर्नी शुरू किया? We don't know. Why it is Naja? We don't know. Why it is Ichthyopis? I don't know. Why it is Ichthyopis bombensis? I don't know. So this is what is the problem. If you have the understanding of where you have started your journey, I think the destination is really important again. Then reaching to that destination is really, really important. So what I request everyone is like, no, taking scientific name is a great thing. No, all the experts do that. But the researchers and amateurs never do that because they have questions. So don't take scientific names again. So did we ever encourage ourselves to ask questions like this? Whenever I see an animal, my brain starts working in a different way. It starts asking questions like why? Why do they have yellow color? Why do they have black color? Why there is a combination of yellow and black? In the first picture, I will start asking those questions. And answer to those questions are in the way they live, what kind of habitat they live, all those kind of things, where do they live, how do they live, all those kind of things are responsible for them having those coloration, So my second question here, why there are these different body forms, and there are answers for those. So we'll not go into those. Today, let's talk about a group which lost their hands and legs. No? So let's talk about the group which is limbless, which doesn't have hands and legs. In that group is called as Apoda. The order is Apoda. Apoda is without limbs. Okay. And they're also called as Gymnophiona. Gymnos is naked and Ophios is snake. These are naked snakes. Why they are called as naked snakes? No? So see, scientific name have some meaning. So it's like, this is something really cool about science. So the people who coined these names, they were like very smart. They had quite a lot of, so very amazing guys. They called this group as Gymnophiona also. So why they are called as Gymnophiona? Why they are called as naked snakes? Let's go ahead and look at this slide now. This slide will tell you that story basically. No? So there are three photos here. Number 1, number 2, and number 3. In all the three, body shape is exactly the same. So I may confuse among each other. Number 1 is an earthworm. Number 2 is a blind snake, and number 3 is a Sicilian. Okay, so Sicilians do resemble earthworms, and they do resemble blind snakes as well. So how to distinguish them? How to diagnose them? For that, we need to go a step further. What are earthworms? Earthworms are invertebrates. Means they don't have bones inside their body. Now, by looking at this picture, you can confidently say that. How? Look at the size of that particular animal. At one point it is smaller, at one point it is larger, like that. No, that is happening quite randomly. It is not very regular. Okay, so this is something which we can think. And why it is not a Sicilian? Because look at the rings. In earthworms, the rings are there at both the ends. So there is no head which you can distinguish. Second picture is of blind snake. Why it is not a Sicilian? Because it has scales on its body. No? Sicilians do have scales, but they have subdermal scales. I mean, their scales are below their skin. You can't see the scales in Sicilians. Okay, so this is something really interesting about them. No? So let's ask the second question: like, where do Sicilians live? And the answer to this question is really amazing. Like I wanted to, when I started studying Sicilians, so we did a very one random experiment in one of the villages near Kolhapur, and there we decided to start looking for Sicilians from the place where we used to stay. We used to stay in a house. It's a small house in a village. So we decided to go out of that house and start looking for the Sicilians and see where we get them. So the Sicilians were there. Then we went into the paddy fields nearby. The Sicilians were there. After that, we went to the forest. The Sicilians were there. And then in the same village, the top of the mountain was flat plateau. Like if you come to the northern Western Ghats, the mountain tops are like plateaus. The Sicilians were there. Means they are everywhere. Basically, when I started looking at looking for the literature on Sicilians, I'm talking about 2000. So much of the literature said that Sicilians prefer a very particular habitat. They are only seen in the forest with loose soil and rich leaf litter, and then there should be a canopy and all that kind of thing. But my understanding was quite different here. Okay, so when we started looking at Sicilians, the study what we started that was in 2001, 2002. And we started looking at Sicilians in the northern Western Ghats. Interestingly, look at the distribution of Sicilians. Like Sicilians are burrowing applicants. We saw that, no? So they don't have hands and legs. That's why they are burrowing. They also don't have modified eyes, very well-developed eyes, because they are burrowing. They don't use their eyes as well. So these are the burrowing applicants. So predominantly in India, they are distributed in the Western Ghats and northeastern part of India. There are 40 different species of Sicilians in India. Out of that, quite a lot of Sicilians are restricted in the Western Ghats. So, and in 2001, I think only few individuals were known from northern Western Ghats. So when I started looking at Sicilians in the northern Western Ghats, one of the biggest hurdle was where to look for them. And most of the literature said look at the habitats like this, those kind of habitats are very few in this particular place. So I had a problem. I said, let's forget about where to look at them. Start looking from them for them everywhere. And that change in the attitude brought a new insight into the habitat preference of Sicilians in the northern Western Ghats as well. Okay, if I would have started looking for Sicilians in the forest, I would have got them there only because the literature said so. But when I started looking at them everywhere, I found them everywhere. Interestingly, they are amazing. They have a strong adaptability. Wherever there is water and soil, you find them. That's what I will say. In the Western Ghats, no, they're quite common. So, but as we move towards the northern extremities, their number decreases. So the rich diversity of Sicilian is there in the southern Western Ghats. And as we come towards north, their number decreases basically. Okay, means habitat-wise, they are everywhere. What do they eat? Sicilians are detritus in their diet. What is detritus? Detritus is, no, they feed on dead and decaying organic matter. They prefer earthworms. Yes, because they are burrowing. So what the ample amount of food which is available there and which is easy to catch and eat, that is earthworms. So Sicilians really like earthworms. They feed on earthworms quite amazingly. It's a very fast feeding thing. So it is like sucking basically. They eat earthworms like noodles. Interestingly, they also feed on variety of things. And much of our understanding of Sicilian diet is based on the animals which are kept in the captivity. And in captivity, they are known to feed on dead and decaying organic matter. Yes, I think they also feed on the one individual which was kept, which fed on dead snake, dead fish, mutton chops, everything. And one of my friend uh, observed them feeding on a live baby snakes as well. Means they are very good and they are cannibalistic as well. They feed on their own individual. So they have a very different diet. They feed on varieties of things. How do they breed? This is something really interesting. A burrowing amphibian, how does it breed? This is something cool about them. So if you look at look at the photographs, no, there is always you will see a photograph when you look for a photograph of a Sicilian, there is always a drawing of a female coiled around the eggs. And in our book also we studied that. No? So when I was in BNHS, I used to get these visits from schools and colleges, and during one of the visits, I was showing them the specimens of Sicilians, and the professor said, "No, there are no Sicilians in India." I said, "Yeah, how's that? This is no. He said, this is Ichthyophis. This is not a Sicilian. So this is what is the problem again. Because I'm not going to those details, but so Sicilians have a very interesting breeding habit. No? So there are live bearing to egg laying. No? So there are many Sicilians which lay eggs. From the eggs, the larvae come out, and there are many Sicilians which give birth to the young ones. No? So this is something cool about them. So in India, the genus Ichthyophis is known to lay eggs, and the adult female, if it is larger in size, she has more number of eggs. And she has she shows parental care basically. She remains with the eggs for maybe until they hatch. And these eggs are in the egg chamber, a place very close to a perennial water source. What happens once these eggs hatch into larvae? Those larvae goes into the nearby stream. In that stream, they metamorphose basically. So they have an aquatic larval stage, and to swim in that aquatic larval stage, they have a short tail fin as well. There's another species called Giganophis ramuswamii, and that species is endemic to the southern part of the Western Ghats. And that species also lay eggs. But interestingly, that species lay eggs in the mulchy place, not very close. And their larvae are not aquatic as such. So once they come out, they go into the mulchy place and they metamorphose there. So this is cool about them. There are many Sicilians which are live bearing as well. There is one species of Sicilian called Giganophis sechecheri, which gives birth to the young ones. And there are many interesting species of Sicilians from South America and South Africa, where people have reported this live-bearing traits, and there are few females. They went one more step ahead. What they started, offering their. Thank you. So interestingly, they got larvae of those systems. Those larvae have a very unique teeth. So the researchers always had a question like why those larvae have unique teeth, why they have a teeth which is not normal. And during the metamorphosis, the teeth changes. The adult have a different teeth and the babies have different teeth. And they were like quite confused about why it is there. So fortunately, one of the scientists observed a very interesting phenomenon. And they also observed that the female has a different skin structure at the time of breeding season, during the breeding season, basically. So there was a confusion happening, like why it is so. So interestingly, one of the scientists later found out that once the baby is hatched, like these Sicilians are live bearing, they give birth to the young ones. The young ones remain with the mother for long. Once the baby is hatched, the first food for them is the skin of the mother. The mother offers her skin. Okay, look at this. This is probably one of the highest level of parental care. No, so this is about the breeding behavior. How do they mate? Sicilians have a male reproductive organ. The male and females are separate, and males have male reproductive organ that is called as phalloidium. Okay, so in frogs you must have seen male and female sits on each other, and then female lay eggs and the male spray the sperms. That is external fertilization. But in Sicilians, there is internal fertilization. What happens? The male inserts that phalloidium inside the female, and then sperms are released, and the fertilization happens inside the body. Okay, so this is again something very interesting. How do Sicilians communicate? As I told you, they don't have strong eyesight. Why do they need the eyesight? Because they are burrowing. Why do they need the eyes? Eyes are there, they are very rudimentary. Then, how do they communicate? That is something cool about them. Let's see. How do they communicate again? Okay, so how to distinguish Sicilians now? As I told you, so if you look at the biodiversity, the diversity is quite amazing. In amphibians, we saw the amphibians were divided in 3 different groups based on presence and absence of some body forms. So one group has tail, those are salamanders. One group has it doesn't have a tail, those are frog and toads. And one group doesn't have hands and legs, that is Sicilian. Now in that group also there is a diversity. No, it's not like all look same. So there is a diversity again. So that diversity is a derivative of their habit and habitats again. Okay, so what is those things? So how to look at those characters, how to distinguish them? This is something really cool again. So look at this. This is something very amazing about Sicilian. No? So if you look at the head has 3 different things. One is eye, another is nostril, and third is a tentacle. This is cool. So one of the unique feature any land vertebrate has is this. Sicilians are the only land vertebrates who has tentacle. Now we can ask the question like, why do they have a tentacle? What is the function of tentacle? Interestingly, tentacle is attached to the nasal passage. Now let's go back a bit and then ask a question like, how do Sicilians communicate? No, they don't have vocal sac. They can't call. They call also. They can't hear because they don't have ear. Do they see? They can't. See, there are 2 pictures here. In one photograph, you can see a little bit eye, and in one photograph, you can't see anything. Means the eyes are also rudimentary. Eyes are also non-functional. What is the major mode of communication? I'm sure they must be using chemical sense to communicate with each other. That chemical sense or that smell must be utilized by Sicilians to communicate with each other. So how to smell that? Is it possible for them to use their nostril and smell? No, it is very difficult. We need to have a very specialized organ to smell that. For that, they have this tentacles. So if you look at the movement of tentacle, it is like tongue of snake. You must have seen the tongue, snake tongue, it flickers. Like that, Sicilians also their tentacles are independently moving, and they come out and go in, come out and go in. They touch the ground, they get the smell like that. So this is cool about them. So Sicilians have all these interesting features. Apart from that, they also have rings on their body. They also have grooves on their body. So for identification, researchers started looking at these features. So the grooves on their body, the placement and orientation, or whatever it may be, or arrangement of eye tentacle nostril. So this is something which we take into consideration while it comes to the identification of Sicilians, to diagnose the Sicilians. As I told you, like look at these two pictures now. The bottom picture, where the eyes are very, very vaguely seen. You can see just a black dot there. And I made a circle, red circle there to show the eye. Look at the top picture where the eye is quite nicely visible. Why so? Interestingly, the top animal is, many times we see them on the ground, moving in the leaf litter and on the ground. And the bottom animal, very rarely you see them on the ground. They are always underground. Means their burrowing habit is directly been decoded by looking at their characters again. If I don't see the eyes, I can confidently say that they are strong burrowers. And if I can see the eye a little bit, they are kind of surface dwelling, basically. This is something very interesting about Sicilians. And again, they have the rings on their body, as I told you. But on the head, the rings are absent. The first ring, which comes on the head, there are 3 rings on their neck, and those are called as nuchal grooves, basically. And the remaining things on their body again. So arrangement of rings, how the rings are placed, arrangement of eye tentacle nostril. Because these are the only features they have. There is nothing more to see. In frogs, we have there are hands and legs. The length, there are fingers and toes. There is a webbing. There are large, big-sized eyes. There are so many things. But in Sicilians, they don't have hands and legs. The only thing they have is rings on their body and some eye tentacle nostril kind of position. So how to utilize these characters to identify them? Look at this now. The rings are also very interestingly placed. Now, if you ask me a question, why do Sicilians have rings? I don't have the answer to that. I don't know why Sicilians have rings, but Sicilians are the only vertebrates, land vertebrates, which has the rings on their body. That much I can tell you. Okay, now, what is the difference between the rings of Sicilians and rings of earthworms? See, the rings of earthworms are like septum. They divide the body. Here it is not the case. The rings are highly only on the outer surface, on the skin, basically. Inside, they can't divide the body like that. Rings are only they're like engravings on their body, basically. Okay, so how are the rings placed? Look at the top picture. They're very closely spaced. They are very compactly spaced. And look at the bottom picture. They are distantly spaced. So we can look at these two things. In some group of Sicilians, the rings are very closely spaced. And in some group of Sicilians, they are distantly spaced. So this is something which we need to look at. Then I also told you that how the eye tentacle nostril. Now how to check this? Basically, draw an imaginary line from the eye to nostril and see where the tentacle goes. Is it below that line? Is it above that line? Or is it on that line? Number 1. Okay. Is that tentacle is closer to eye or closer to nostril? That is also been recorded. Okay. So just think like this. If I want to diagnose Sicilians, or if I want to identify Sicilians in India, and I have only these features to check, can I use these features and identify Sicilians to a certain level in India? Yes, you can. You can use this feature to identify the Sicilians in India up to the genus level. Let me show you how to do that. See now, in this form, check the rings on the body. The rings are highly compactly spaced. One character. Second, how is the position of eye tentacle nostril? From eye to nostril, if I draw a line, the tentacle is coming below that line, and it is in between. Means if I join these three points, I can come up with a triangle. So remember that tentacle is below that eye nostril line and in between. Third, they also have a short tail. You can see that, no? There is a short tail present. Now, can you ask a question like why a burrowing amphibian has a short tail like this? Why do they have a tail? No, so I'm trying to tell you that for everything there is. So is it an ancestral trait, a trait which has been there in their ancestor, which is again retained in their in this particular generation, or is there a need for that? So these are the two reasons why do they have those particular things. No, whatever we have is for a reason, basically. No, or is an ancestral thing. So can we ask the question like why do burrowing Sicilians have a short tail? Answer to that is again very interesting. As I told you during the breeding stage, some Sicilians have an aquatic larva, and that aquatic larva has a small fin on its tail that is called as tail fin, and that tail fin is needed for that larva to swim in water. And, and once the larva becomes adult, when the larva metamorphoses into an adult stage, it comes on the ground and it moves there. It is not an aquatic Sicilian. It is a terrestrial Sicilian, basically. So for an adult stage, they don't need the tail. They don't need the tail fin as such. So the tail fin is there in the larval stage. For that, they need a short tail again. So this is something really cool. So in a group of Sicilian, if it is a Sicilian in India, which has compactly spaced rings, where the eye tentacle nostril is like a triangle and there is a short tail, you can confidently say that it is genus Ichthyophis. Very simple, it's not very difficult. By looking at these characters, you can identify any known genre of Sicilian in India. Okay, so I told you now. I think before some time I was discussing that, we take the scientific names without understanding. We take the scientific names without proper knowledge. The moment you are taking a scientific name, try to tell yourself that I know the reasons, that's why I'm calling that name. If you don't know the reasons, don't say a name or don't take a scientific name. Why I'm telling this? Because the name is the beginning of everything. Name is the beginning of research. Name is the beginning of conservation. If you say something, if you take the name wrongly, so every action which is happening after that is of no use. That's why taking the name should be serious. Now, who can take the name? Who can take the scientific name? The people who has the understanding of the characters can take the scientific name. Who are those people who has that understanding? Anyone who has interest about understanding these animals, who has inclination to read and study those characters, who has potentials to spend time in understanding those characters are the experts. Is there any education I am discussing? Am I telling you that the people who has zoology background can take the name? Is it like that? No. Anybody who wish to understand and who wish to decode these characters to take the name are qualified to call as experts or researchers, basically. So what I mean to say here is, please, without proper understanding, don't take the name. No. Can anybody can we randomly take names? No, we can't, because that creates a chaos. That will create a problem. So it is true for Sicilians, true for all the animals. Okay, so you are nature lovers. You are saying that this is a common cobra or this is a peacock. Now I should know why I'm calling that particular bird as a peacock. Without that, we shouldn't be saying that. Okay. Second, look at this. This is another very interesting group of Sicilians in India. So here, the rings are kind of compactly spaced or distantly spaced. There is a kind of confusion again. But look at the tail. There is a short tail present. What does that indicate? They have an aquatic larval stage. Now, where is the tentacle here? I can only see the eye and nostril. I can't see any tentacle. To see the tentacle, see exactly below the nostril. Exactly below the nostril, can you see some bulging there? That bulging is a tentacle. Okay, so any Sicilian in India where the tentacle is below the nostril is Eriotyphlops, is the genus Eriotyphlops. So in India, we have some 5 genera. One is Ichthyophis, one is Eriotyphlops, one is Bigniophis, another Indotyphlops, and fifth is Cichila. So out of that, now 2 genera, we identified 2 genera now. See, one we saw that, no, the tail is there, that triangle, like if you see here, go back, I suppose. Okay, if you see here, no, so the center picture, no, I can make a triangle. I can, if I draw a straight line, and if I connect these 3, I can make a triangle. So, can I make a triangle here? I can, but that tentacle is exactly below the nostril. No, so this is a very unique character. Look at this. The rings are distantly spaced. You can see that, no? Like quite a lot of broad rings are there. Then very short tail. Tail is absent. Technically, there is no tail because after the cloacal aperture, that thing is becoming rounded. So the tail is absent. Means they don't have an aquatic larval stage. Third, how is the position of eye tentacle nostril? If I draw a straight line, all the 3 fall on the one line itself. They all are in a single line, single straight line basically. So if you come across any Sicilian in India with distantly spaced rings, very short tail or tail absent, and eye tentacle nostril in a single straight line, you can confidently say that it is the genus Indotyphlops. Okay. Again, this genus is endemic to the northern Western Ghats, means only known from Maharashtra. There are 2 species known in this particular genus. One is Indotyphlops maharashtriensis, and another is Indotyphlops batris v. Cool Sicilians, very amazing Sicilians. Now, this is the 4th one. How the rings are again distantly spaced, tail absent, but look at their eye tentacle nostril. Now, one more thing which I forgot to mention. We can just observe the eye here. Now, in this genus, the eye is quite visible. Means I can see a bulge there. Means the eyes are slightly popping out. Means there is some functionality. That's why I told you, these Sicilians are generally seen among leaf litter. These are the surface-dwelling Sicilians. So imagine all the Sicilians are burrowing, but in that also there are different groups. So there are different groups again. So why and how they utilized a very limited resource effectively? This is what we need to learn from nature. The resources are limited, but they have utilized it in such a way that they all are living in harmony. They are living happily there. So few Sicilians decided to go up on the surface and live there, so that they are avoiding competition with the Sicilians below. Okay. And then few Sicilians decided to go a little bit down. That's why check the eyes. Eyes are there, but they are not like very well there. Then check this. The eye is there, but I can't see the bulging as such. It is covered with skin. Means they are burrowing. They are deep burrowing. They rarely come on the surface. See, again, there is a very stratified division of whatever that available habitat there, resources there. So at few groups of Sicilians are on the top, few are in between, and there is third group where the eyes are under the skull bone. Means they rarely come out on the ground. They are strongly burrowing. So this is something cool about Sicilians. Okay, so again, you saw that. And here, if I draw a straight line from eye to nostril, it is like triangle again. The tentacle is below and in between. So if you look at all these features, so it is quite easy for us to distinguish between various Sicilians, to identify them, to look at, and then see, whenever we are looking at characters, we should be asking why those characters are there. So this is something which is always missing in our teaching practices. Whenever we teach taxonomy, we don't correlate that particular thing with their habit or habitats. Interestingly, all these characters are derived because of the need or because of their ancestral trait. And we never encourage ourselves to ask the question like, why do they have it? Because we started the presentation today with quite a lot of interesting stories. Like we started with why Sicilians lost their limbs, why Sicilians lost their eyes, because they started living underground. And there also, they followed various strategies. Those strategies help them to effectively live in those particular habitats. Imagine, you are living underground and there are 40 different species of Sicilians below in that particular habitat, which has limited resources. Look at the number of frogs. There are so many different species of frogs out there because frogs have many, many resources. Interestingly, why there are so many frogs? Because frogs are there in water. Frogs have different resources: aquatic, terrestrial, arboreal, everything. Frogs have different resources. There are tree-dwelling frogs, there are aquatic frogs, there are terrestrial frogs. In the terrestrial frogs are also varieties of frogs: dry area frogs, wet area frogs. And that's why their number is really high. But for Sicilians, they have very limited resources. जमीन के नीचे क्या मिलेगा उनको खाने के लिए? But there are 40 different species of known Sicilians in India. And believe me, if somebody does serious work on the Sicilians in India, I'm sure that number must be around 80. Means 50% Sicilians in India are not known to science. Imagine how much amount of work you people have to do. Second, do I know what is the habitat preference for all the Sicilians in India? No, I don't know. I only say that they are burrowing. But burrowing means what? I told you, in that also they have a different strata. And what kind of habitat they require. For any known Sicilian in India, I don't have that information. Means I don't know where these Sicilians live in India. Second. Third, how do they breed? I think we have very limited understanding for a few species of Sicilians in India. Maybe 2 or 3 species for which we know that they lay eggs. And this is what is the number. And that is also based on 1 or 2 observations, not more than that. Means we have very limited understanding about the breeding behavior. What do they feed? What I told you was a general explanation. Okay, so that was the explanation for all the Sicilians in the world. Now I told you that some Sicilians live on the upper surface and some below. Means they have a different feeding strategies as well. There could be some different feeding strategies as well. What are those? Do we really know that? We don't know. See, for such an amazing group of animals which are really common, we don't know anything about them. What is the present status of Sicilians in India? We don't know. Are they doing well? We don't know. Look at the conservation, IUCN conservation status of many Sicilians. It is called data deficient. What does data deficient means? We don't have any data. Means it is worse than vulnerable, worse than critically endangered. Means we don't know what is happening to them. Okay. Are there any conservation measures particularly for Sicilians? No. Because many people don't know that there is a group of vertebrates called Sicilians available. Guys, I think we have to come out of that charismatic species concept and start looking at them. See, all these unknown groups like amphibians are the foundations of the biodiversity. They are at the base of the biodiversity and on which all the bigger life forms are living. If they are not there, I'm sure the top ones are going to go. The well-being of all the top animals, which also includes humans, is directly related to the animals which are living at the bottom. The animals which are living, like animals like Sicilians, amphibians, they are really important, equally important, and we need to understand them for the well-being of biodiversity, for the well-being of food chain, for the well-being of everything. Okay. So thank you very much for this small session. I tried my level best to pack quite a lot of information among this. And I'm sorry for quite a lot of problems which happened because I think, I don't know, some technical issues. I'm an old person with limited knowledge. So all those problems must be related to that. Now I think the session is open for discussion.
Yes, thank you all for this talk. In case anybody has any more questions, please feel free to write them in the chat box.
How do we apply this knowledge? See, basically, there are multiple facets to what we call as knowledge. One is name. Second is ecology. Third is natural history. No? So in biodiversity, if you look at now, for example, no, if I want to conserve tiger, no, I need to know which tiger I want to conserve. I need to know the food of the tiger. I need to know the habitat of the tiger. I need to know when and how that habitat has been utilized by the tiger. And look at the amount of work which is happening in that particular sector. There are so many people generating that data. That information is available, and that information is getting converted into a management practice. And based on that information, tiger conservation is happening today. For conservation of any known life form, I need to know these things. I need to know the name first. Then I need to know their food, and then I need to know where do they live. If I don't have that information, conservation is of no use. It's not possible. So I think for effective conservation of any life form, all these things are equally needed. I hope you are getting my point. No, it's like जो भी हम लोग सोच रहे हैं कि ये क्यों चाहिए, why we need that. Like I read that question which says that no, how do you apply this knowledge? Like you can apply this knowledge at multiple levels. And at the end of the day, the end product of all that thing is conservation, basically. And for that, we need that knowledge, no? So I think we need that knowledge. But unfortunately, for Sicilians, do we have that knowledge? That is a question. Unfortunately, for Sicilians, we don't have any knowledge. No? So I think there is a need to have this knowledge again. So Furkan has a question. What are the books or resources which we can read from? See, unfortunately, again, we don't have any very good book on Sicilians. But there are quite a lot of resources available for the Sicilians of the world, but not for India as such. There's one book which I can, not book, but one resource which I can think of that has been published by Zoological Survey of India. And they did some and that book got published in 1990s and has a very vague idea of Sicilians in India. And apart from that, there are quite a few publications by Dr. G.K. Bhatt. So he is one of the pioneers in the studies on Sicilians in India. And I think his publications are really good resources for Sicilians in India. Apart from that, we don't have any book available as such. No? David has a question, and he's saying that there are aquatic Sicilians in Colombia. David, we don't have any aquatic Sicilians in Colombia, but the larvae of genus Ichthyophis are aquatic. The adults are terrestrial again. So we don't have an aquatic Sicilian in India. We don't have any aquatic Sicilian in India here. Okay, Sahas has a question: how to study description? Sahas, as I told you, like their body has different characters. Their body has rings. They have a tentacle, eye, nostril. They also have teeth. I forgot to mention. The Sicilians have teeth. There are 2 rows of teeth on their upper jaw, 2 rows of teeth on their lower jaw. So we need to count the teeth. The number of teeth, number of rings, arrangement of rings, and everything is taken into consideration for the identification of Sicilians. Nowadays, we are also using DNA. DNA is also giving us quite a lot of insights. And apart from that, people also look at the male reproductive organ that is called phallodium. The structure of male reproductive organ can also become one of the taxonomic characters. No? And once you have to extract those characters and use those characters to distinguish them or to describe them. No? Okay, Varad Bokil has a question. How they dig certain chemical around them to make soil easy? No, Varad. Like if you look at their head shape is quite unique. Their head is like bullet shaped. No? And if you look at their skull, the bones in the skull are very compactly spaced. The skin on their skull is very tightly attached. And they dig by using their head basically. And that's why, see again, during the monsoon, what happens? The soil becomes quite loose because of the rains. Once the rain goes, the soil becomes quite loose. And they use that loose soil to burrow. And Sicilians, again, as I told you, they are amphibians. So you can't see them in drier areas because their skin has to be moist. If the skin doesn't remain moist, they die. No? Die because of quite a lot of, because the skin is something which is really important to them. So they have secretion on their skin, but I don't feel that they use that secretion to dig. But probably that secretion is being used. Like they have few studies were conducted. They said that there is a network of burrows. And they use those networks to move here and there. And if they have the network of burrows, probably the skin secretion is been used in those burrows to keep that particular things easy to move. No? But not for digging. Digging, they don't use any secretion. They just use their head for digging. So Sangeeta has a question. Okay, Sangeeta has a suggestion saying that emphasizing attention on little life forms. Yes, Sangeeta ji, the main problem today is we are behind charismatic species. And see, running behind charismatic species is not a bad thing. We have to, but they are also equally important. See, what people say, if you conserve a tiger, tiger is the apex predator. If you conserve a tiger, you are conserving the entire biodiversity. So I have a different analogy here. Let's conserve the bottom of the biodiversity. Once we do that, we are conserving tiger as well. Why we don't sell that? We never sell that because, see, Sicilians are never considered as charismatic animals. They will never get that attention. Unfortunately, if you look at them, if you look at their lifestyle, if you look at the way they live, they are more than charismatic. See, the problem is we are not going beyond that state. Unfortunately, our nature has many limitations, and one of them is we are not asking questions. We are accepting things quite easily. We say, oh, this is like this, let's accept it. And that's where we are stopping. I feel that that's where your journey needs to start. We need to ask questions like why I do, why all these things are there. So this is something we have to ask. Okay, Saunak has a very interesting question. Saunak Pal has a question. Why do Sicilians have scales? See, Saunak, again, that is something which is again a debatable issue. People are discussing about that. It is. So basically, these are burrowing animals, and probably the subdermal, like for everyone. I think I did mention, but again, I'll make it clear again here. That Sicilians have subdermal scales. Subdermal means they have scales below their skin. There are multiple layers of scales below their skin. Means you can't see those scales. Okay. Now, someone has a question: why do they have scales below the skin? Probably, I think that also gives the additional protection. Because they are burrowing, they are below the soil. They need additional protection. So probably, they do have the scales are needed for them for the additional protection, and it could be also ancestral trait which is retained. We don't know. So burrowing habit and scale is supporting them. That's what I can think of now. No? Abid Hussein has a question. Okay, he's saying that talk on herpetology. I think let's do that. Okay.
Yeah, that's more like a compliment than a demand.
Okay, thank you very much. Every species having specific tolerance for soil pH. Yes, Varad, thank you very much for bringing this up again. So Varad is asking that, saying that I think every species tolerance for pH, soil and temperature, right? Yes, see, Varad, again, what I'm trying to emphasize here that Sicilians are everywhere, like they are in different strata, and there probably they have different, like Ethiopians to that matter. No, they have to lay their eggs in water, means they are very close to water again, and their larva is aquatic. The pH of water is probably one of the important factors for them to decide, like if I can lay my eggs here or not. So, and they must be using all these things to keep a safe distance from each other, so that there is no competition happening. All the resources are equally utilized. Unfortunately, that level of understanding is not there. So we know that where we get Sicilians and all that kind of thing, but nobody has went a step ahead to look at soil pH. There are quite a lot of studies which were done in the past, but again, those studies were highly. I always say that those are kind of biased. Basically, means I went to a place where I used to get Sicilians, and I got the data based on that, and I'm saying that this is what is the requirement. But as I told you, I got Sicilians everywhere, and I don't have the data from that particular place. I'm missing a lot of naturalist information, and our understanding today is based on a preliminary observations which were done from a limited sources, basically. So to get the answer for soil pH and temperature, etc., we should have a strong study looking at various groups. No. Sahas Mehta has a question. Where do we see them close to Pune? I think Sahas, go out to, I think, what is this? Tamini. I think they are common in Tamini as well. No, they are there in Tamini. So Furkan has a question. Are they active throughout the year or they estivate hibernate? See, Furkan, the thing is, I always say that the Sicilians are active during the monsoon season. Means you see them during the monsoon season. Okay, and during the post-monsoon season, what happens to them? We don't know. Probably they go underground and they remain there. But there are few individuals seen very close to water source during summer period as well. Because interestingly, the eggs of Ichthyophis are generally seen in some areas. The eggs of Ichthyophis are generally seen during the onset of monsoon.
Bluetooth device.
Once, if eggs are during the monsoon, what does that indicate? There is a breeding happened prior to that. Means there must be some action happening in pre-monsoon showers as well. No? So again, no, like see, I'm putting in speculations here. Interestingly, I told you there are 40 different species of Sicilian. Many people studying Sicilians today in India? Can anybody tell me here? Today in India, how many people are seriously studying Sicilians? Not 5. Less than 5. Can you imagine this? And tiger is one species. How many people are studying tigers in India? Think about this. So this is what is the problem. So we know everything about tigers because there are so many people studying them, studying tigers. There are so many Sicilians, but very few people studying Sicilians. So our understanding is highly limited because of the people who are studying them. So the more number of people, probably our understanding will be much more. No. Okay. Gloria has a question. Is there a reason for annular spacing? So I think I really don't know exactly, because I had discussions with Dr. Mark Wilkinson and Dr. David Cover of Natural History Museum, London. So these are the authorities on Sicilians in the world. And interestingly, they belong to a country where there are no Sicilians. Look at the irony. And I've been with them. I studied. No, I did quite a lot of. See, all my understanding today, thanks to Mark and David, that is enriched by their training, basically. So we also did discussions about why there is a diversity in the rings. Okay. So Gloria, thank you for asking this question. But at this stage, we don't have a very strong understanding. One thing which I can tell you that as they go deeper, their rings are a bit widely spaced. And this is again my understanding of Sicilians from India. More terrestrial Sicilians have more compactly spaced rings, and the burrowing Sicilians have distantly spaced rings. So what does that mean? I really don't know. But this is what I know. So Aniket has a question. What are their living style? Like groups or something? Oh, Aniket, the Sicilians are solitary. They don't live in the groups. Okay. But see, nature has its own way of teaching. Okay. So this is what we say. But interestingly, we were doing survey in Northern Western Ghats, and we were on a plateau. No, it's a rocky outcrop where there is no soil, and everybody said that, oh, this is not a place for Sicilians. We don't see them there. But it was raining, and accidentally we stopped there, and one of my friends went and turned one rock, and he saw one Sicilian there, and we all got very much fascinated. We started searching for it, and under one rock, one of my very good friends called Ravi Bhambure. Okay, so he got a bunch of Sicilians there. It was a rock of hardly 2 by 2 feet. And below that, there were some 21 or 23 individuals. Why they were there? And there were babies, there were adults, there were males, there were females, everything was there. No? I will tell you about how to distinguish between male and female afterwards. But everything was there. So why they come together, we don't know. But mostly Sicilians are solitary. You don't see them in groups. Okay. And now, how to distinguish between male and female? It's very, very difficult. But in that group called Giganoepis caesarii, in that group, the males have a very flat tail. Females don't have. Females have a round tail. So that is something. And why? I don't know. Okay. Sangeeta has a question. So in a similar way, how one can differentiate between earthworm and a Sicilian? See, Sangeeta, it's very simple. Earthworms are invertebrates. Means they don't have a bone inside the body. No? Means they don't have jaw. Means they don't have eyes. They don't have teeth. Okay. And all these things are there in Sicilians. You can use that. And interestingly, in one of the photographs I was showing, no, there are no rings on their head. So in the earthworms, the rings are there throughout their body. Means you can't differentiate between head and tail. But in Sicilians, you can do that because there are no rings on their head. No? And another thing, I see these are some of the rude methods with which I can differentiate between Sicilians and earthworms now. So if you look at earthworms have a very, like they don't have a bone. So their body is like a rubber. It extends and contracts. But Sicilians can't do that because there is bone inside their body. So they can't do that. Another thing, while digging, many times there are earthworms as well. But what earthworms do, they start jumping. Many times Sicilians can't do that. No? So these are some of the ways to differentiate between earthworms and Sicilians. Okay. Nilesh Singh has a question. What is the major reason that Indian genus Ureotypulus are said to be nearly extinct species? Who said that? Nilesh, I heard that Ureotypulus is the extinct species. There must be one species in that genus which is considered extinct, unfortunately, because somebody described that species and after that nobody went and searched for it. No, and they did not search for it, and they said that, oh, it is not there, it is extinct. Probably if you go and search, they are there. No, so the genus is not extinct. There are so many species in that genus. Okay, and that is very common. It is one of the commonest Sicilian in Kerala. No, it is a garden Sicilian again. You can see that Sicilian in their gardens as well. Okay, probably there is one species which is considered as very rare. And that, see, one more thing, I wish to bring it to everybody's attention. The apparent rarity of Sicilians is because of lack of field work. Okay, frogs are vocal, frogs call, so we can spot them. Frogs can jump, we can see them. But Sicilians are burrowing. And to spot them, we need to remove the leaf litter, we need to look at the rocks, we need to do manual labor basically. We need to dig a lot. Then and then only we see Sicilians. Otherwise, spotting them is not easy. So everybody say that Sicilians are rare, but tell me, if you ask me, I will say that they are not. If you are a real hard worker and if you are into digging and looking for Sicilians, I think we can see them. So I did one field outing with Sushil in Sharavati. Do you remember Sushil?
Yes.
I think we dug half of the forest.
Yes.
and then we got one individual.
One individual. Yeah.
So if we would not have done that kind of digging, we should have said, oh, there are no Sicilians here. But one thing we can confidently say today that yes, there are Sicilians in Sharavati because we were digging for 2 days. Okay, so like that, we have to do manual labor to spot Sicilians.
Yeah.
No.
Also, there are habitats where people haven't gone, like because they anticipated, because some book says that there are no Sicilians.
Yeah, as I told you, like plateaus, man. Plateaus, people say that there are no Sicilians. There is one thing. If anybody want to see a Sicilian, I will tell you 2 localities. Go there in monsoon. You will 100% you will get the Sicilian. One is in Matheran. There is a place called Paymaster Park. There is a Paymaster Park. करके एक जगह है. Okay, go there. There is a water tank. No, you go there and there is a gutter. And just search under the rocks there. You will 100% you will see the Sicilians there. And there are plateaus in Sindhudurga and Ratnagiri district in Maharashtra. Go there now and turn the rock. You'll get Sicilians there. And both these places are not considered as suitable habitats for Sicilians, where they are in large numbers. Okay, so this is what is the problem. No, it's like our understanding is very poor about them. So they're not rare. They're common. Now, is there any fossil evidence of Sicilians and any comment on the evolution and origin? See, Divyanshu Pawar, it's a really very interesting question, but I am a very ill-trained person to answer this question because I never read about this, and this is really unfortunate to say it here. But I will surely go through that. I will just read it and I'll come back to you. At this stage, I don't have an answer for this question, and I'm feeling ashamed of myself now. Okay.
I think Sahas has a question for you. Does the mother die after the larvae eat the scales?
No. Sahasji, see what happens. See, again, this is a smart move, no? So mother develops that additional layer of skin, and she knows that is needed for her babies. And I'm sure that particular layer of skin, once the babies hatch, that is not getting connected. Again, that has been discarded basically. No? So see, we all amphibians also lose their skin. We know that snakes molt their skin. Like that, the molting happens in amphibians as well. So I think probably that is like that. That thick layer of skin is been detached, and that has been offered by a mother to eat. The babies eat on that. Okay, the mother doesn't die. No.
Yeah. So I think Varad, that answers your next question as well, and so does Jasmine ma'am. I think Varad's answer applies to your question as well, which is, does the mother allow the larvae to eat the top skin layer?
Only top skin layer which has been offered, not the body again.
Yeah. Now, so Aman's question is the last question of the day, which is, can we find any Sicilian species in Rajasthan during monsoon season?
See, if you look at biogeography of Rajasthan, how the Rajasthan is formed, Rajasthan is quite a different landscape altogether, very dry landscape, very arid landscape. And I don't feel that Sicilian should be there because it's quite dry. And then we can also look at the diversity of amphibians across various places. Amphibians, as I told you, they require a very wet kind of habitat. They require water for their survival, and Rajasthan is quite dry place. And if you look at the distribution of Sicilians in the world, it is pantropical. They are mostly in the tropical forest because whatever habitat temperature, whatever is needed, it is quite ample, proper there. And that's why they are there. And anything north or south of that, you don't see much Sicilian there. So I don't think of getting Sicilians in Rajasthan, Amanji. It's not possible.
Aniket has a last question. I hope I didn't miss, but just curious about the lifespan to the liver.
No, nobody knows. For us, we don't know. For Indian Sicilians, we don't know. So there are few Sicilians kept in captivity. They lived for long, but for Indian Sicilians, we don't know.
Right. I think we can conclude our session today. Varad, I would really like to thank you for joining us today.
Thanks. And again, I would like to express my apologies for all the
No, it was a wonderful
on-
session.
unwanted
Also, to
feedback.
all the participants here, I would like to suggest that Bharat does a series of workshop under his organization called NIDUS. Their handler is @NIDUS Explore. So all the coming up workshops that you are keen on joining with him, you can find on his page. He's also on social media. Also, others who are looking forward to having a career in wildlife, but they're confused about whether to go into research or conservation or photography or cinematography or tourism. We have a course coming up next month, which is the Wilderness Connect course. It's a 4-month course, happens on the Sundays every morning. This is not for a specialized course. This is a course for people who are confused about which wing of wildlife would they be inclined towards. And later, after that, then they can opt for the courses offered by Bharat and other organizations. So you can check out NIDUS Explore on Facebook and Instagram. Bharat himself is also on social media. And in case you're keen on the Wilderness Connect course, you can find the details on our website, yourjourneys.co.in or Journey Explore on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you all for joining us.
Social 1 minute.
Sorry.
No,
Yeah.
I would like to request Divanshu Pawar to write me an email with his question. So I want to answer. I want to answer his question.
Perfect. Don't worry. I'll connect you with him because
I have to answer that question first.
No, don't worry. I'll connect you with him. He's my first cousin, anyways. So
Great.
So thank you guys. I hope you guys join us on Sunday. We have a talk by Siddharth Edke, one of the researchers at the Energy and Research Institution. He's talking about how community conservation helps revive wildlife in Nagaland. Thank you guys.